Hi there, I'm Paul Haberstrood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. Here's something we know. It's a little, let's call it a life truism, if that's not too grandiose. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. That goes for life, love, and work. So how do you get off on the right foot? Later in the show, we get some advice on how to crush your first few days at a new job. But up first, we have a big idea for fighting the trade war. Trump's trade war has caused much soul-searching in this country. With friends like these, right? So we may need to make some changes. And some big ideas have been floated. Like, buckle up for this one, maybe we should join the European Union. The Prime Minister wants us to get closer to Europe. He's called Canada the most European of the non-European countries. And hey, we like souvlaki, schnitzel. So, is joining the EU realistic? Frédéric Morand is a professor of political science at the University of Montreal. He wrote about this idea for Policy Options, a magazine put out by the Institute for Research on Public Policy. Hi there.
Hi.
So, Frédéric, let's state the obvious here. Canada is not in Europe. Would it even be possible for this country to join the EU?
In theory, yes. And let me get an obstacle out of the way right now. Oftentimes people will say, well, Canada is not in Europe. And to be part of the European Union, it says that you have to be a European country, which is true, except that being a European country is not defined anywhere. And for example, Turkey is considered to be a candidate. It's true that they have a few square kilometers on the European continent, but most of the country is in Asia. There are lots of French overseas territories like Guadeloupe, Martinique, or Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, right on our shores, that are part of the European Union, despite the fact that they're not on the European continent. So geography, for me, is not the main obstacle. In theory, Canada meets all of the requirements. It's a market economy, it's a stable democracy with the rule of law. The main challenge, if Canada wanted to become part of the European Union, would be for Canada to adopt what is called in French the acquis communautaire. It's also called the acquis communautaire in English. And what it means is that to become part of the European Union, you have to adopt all the supranational laws that have been passed since 1957. So it means that it's not something that can happen overnight, but in theory, it is doable.
All right, well, in theory then, if we went down this road, if we actually did it, what would Canada get out of joining the EU?
Well, first, it would get a new market. I mean, right now, the only reason why we're talking about Canada joining the EU in any serious way is, of course, because our main trade partner, the United States, is threatening us with tariffs, and we don't know if it's going to last only for a few months or a few years, or if it's going to be like a long-term situation in which we do lose significant market shares south of the border, and therefore we need to find new places to trade with. And Europe is an obvious partner because although right now it's not a very significant one, it has a very mature economy. They're interested in all kinds of goods that we can export, and we can import a lot of stuff from there as well. The two economies are kind of fairly compatible. The main challenge, as you mentioned at the outset, is of course the Atlantic Ocean, which makes it more difficult to trade with Europe than, for example, with the United States.
I'm wondering, though, we already have a free trade deal with the EU. It's CETA. Could our trading relationship get even closer beyond what we already have with CETA?
Well, if we were part of the EU, and that's something that oftentimes people don't realize, it would mean a lot more than a free trade agreement. It would mean basically no obstacle, because what the EU is, and that's very different from North American free trade, it's not only no tariffs, it means the same regulations apply across the organization. So there are no non-tariff barriers, if you like. If you want to export your chicken or your oil to Europe, there are absolutely no obstacles. And the reason is because you have to implement European laws. So there's, a trade-off here. But so it's more than a free trade agreement. Now, that being said, you're right that we have a free trade agreement. It's almost 10 years old now. And it is clear that we're not exploiting it to its fullest extent. Part of the reason is because, again, the US is so close, it's so attractive. So I think a lot of Canadian firms don't even think about Europe. They may start thinking about it a bit more right now, but also because there hasn't been so much political impetus or so much political attention given to all the opportunities that lie across the Atlantic. Now, finally, there's another reason, and we keep going back to this Atlantic pond that separates us. In terms of infrastructures, they're just not there. So if we wanted to export a lot more to Europe, we would need, more bigger ports and a lot more investment in our sort of Eastern-oriented infrastructures.
What about size? I mean, it seems like the trading world that is now coming to be, it feels like size matters, that more clout matters. If we joined the EU with its 450 million people, added our 40 million people, would just that extra size make a difference for us?
Well, I think that's the main attraction of either joining the EU or getting a lot closer, because that is one of the only organizations that's capable of standing up, for example, to Trump or to China or to Russia, something that Canada is probably too small to be able to do. It's also an organization that's democratic. So on the one hand, Canada would be only one part of the EU, but on the other hand, we would have parliamentarians, we would sit on the EU Council, we would have a voice at the table. But clearly the main attraction of joining the EU is being part of a large club of rich democracies in a world where they're becoming rarer by the day, because we're losing our friendship with the US and because the alternatives are not extremely attractive if we think about China or India, for example, not to mention Russia.
Yeah. So the idea of teaming up with the EU, with all of the countries in Europe, what would be the hurdles to Canada actually going down that road?
Well, the main hurdle that I can think of would be Canadian federalism, in the sense that to become part of the EU, you have to, again, upgrade, overhaul your regulatory system, and many of the things that you need to change are provincial jurisdictions. And we know how hard it is to create, for example, a Canadian single market. So that would be a major challenge for Canada. It would perhaps even require constitutional changes. So, who wants to deal with this? I'm not sure. And then in terms of the economy, again, I mean, the pull factor right now is so American-centered that it's kind of hard to imagine how we would reorient all of our economy towards the European market. So it only makes sense if we're thinking of hedging our bets, if we think that access to the US market is going to become so difficult over the next decade that we really need another option. Otherwise, the cost to make that transition will be very high. And finally, I mean, there's a political obstacle which is different from the Constitution, which is that Canadian public opinion would be probably quite divided about it. There are people, and polls show that there are people who are attracted to the idea. There are people who feel very close to Europe in Canada, but there are also a lot of people who feel very American, who are comfortable with, for example, what Trump is doing in the US, or even closer to Asia or the global South. So clearly, it would create a very difficult national conversation.
At the moment, it seems like Prime Minister Carney is pouring cold water on the idea of officially joining the EU. So I suppose I'm wondering here, if joining is more of just a thought experiment, are there still reasons to indulge in that kind of thinking right now?
Look, the simple fact that we're having this conversation right now on CBC is just incredible. Like 6 months from now, no one would have even had a serious discussion about us joining the EU. There was a poll that found that 46% of Canadians would support Canada's EU membership. Of course, they don't really know what it means, but 6 months ago, we would not have even asked the question. So, clearly the discussion is changing a lot. And I think talking about EU membership is just a very nice way, a bit simplistic, but nice way of encapsulating the fact that we need new friends. We want to get closer to the EU because we have no alternative. We're probably not join the EU, but there's a lot we can do in the meantime to get a lot closer to them. And if we call it like joining the EU, why not? But the conversation has really changed if we compare now to 6 months ago.
As you say, it's a conversation we weren't having 6 months ago. We are now. The one thing we know for sure is that times, they change quickly. So thank you very much for taking us through all that.
My pleasure.
Frederic Morand is a professor of political science at the University of Montreal. Your palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. You're nervous, but on the surface you look calm and ready because it's your first day on a new job. You know you only get one shot to make a first impression. In the latest installment in our summer HowTo series, executive coach Anna Ross looks at what it takes to crush day one at a new job.
I'm really passionate about the area of people starting new roles because it's both really exciting, but also quite scary and stressful. And none of this stuff happens in isolation. When we start a new role, it can often have an impact on our home life. It could mean a longer commute, more days in the office, a change in routine at home. So it causes a huge amount of change in our lives. Preparing ahead to get ready for a new role is so important. There's loads of research out there that shows the people who hit the ground running are the ones that prepare the earliest. So use the time you have, if you have any between roles, to really think about what you want from your next role. Who do you want to be? How do you want to present yourself? What experiences do you want to get from this role? So thinking ahead about how you're going to make this work for you is really important, because then you can be much more deliberate on your first day. It's also important, if you can, to connect with as many of your new co-workers as possible. So if you can meet your new manager face to face for a quick coffee to get to know them better. If you're leading a team, if you can ask to meet your team in advance, anything you can do to give you more information or to kickstart key relationships before you start a new role means you hit the ground running faster on day one. There's this stat flown around that says you get 7 seconds to make a first impression. And I do think there's an element of truth within that. People make judgments really quickly. So decide what you want that judgment to be. Practice things like, how firm do you want your handshake to be? What are you going to say to introduce yourself in 30 seconds? What are you going to wear as a really practical thing? Driving to the office and testing the commute is a great practical suggestion so that you can really focus on the stuff that makes a big difference when you start a new role, like building relationships, is a great way to focus your energy. It is completely normal to feel a bit useless and a bit like a spare part in the first couple of days. And it takes a long time to truly know what you're doing in a new role. It's expected that it takes about 3 months for someone to feel like they kind of know what they're doing in their new role. It takes 6 months-ish to think, oh yeah, okay, I'm motoring a bit now, I've got a handle on this. And it can take up to 3 years to feel like you've really nailed the culture. A couple of big don'ts when you start a new job. Don't assume anything. Don't jump the gun and just go and change everything too quickly. And oh, why on earth do we do it this way is not going to get you very far. But if you're coming from a place of curiosity, oh, it's really interesting that you do things that way here. I've not seen it done like that before. What's made you take that approach? Means you can, again, going back to questions, you can learn more. And it's this golden opportunity to ask silly questions. People love it when you ask questions about their work and you show curiosity, and it helps you much more quickly build up the knowledge that you need. People love to help people. People like it when people show an interest. Ask the questions, because it really is the best way that we learn. I believe if you've got the right attitude, and if you're willing to be curious and ask questions and be open-minded, being new can be the most amazing opportunity.
Anne-Harriet Ross is an executive coach based in Reading, England. Before we go, we're wondering if you have any questions about business or the economy. Let us know and we'll do our best to answer it on an upcoming show. Now, in the past, you've asked some bangers, like, is it faster to go through the drive-thru at a fast food joint? Or how can it be cheaper to ship something all the way from China than the province next door? So if you have a question, give us a call and let us know. Our number is 1-866-550-COST. That's 1-866-550-2678. Or email costofliving@cbc.ca. The show is based in Calgary. The Cost of Living is produced by Danielle Nerman, Blair Sanderson, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Haversrud. Thanks for listening.